Salutations, families! I wanted to acknowledge that our district has been in the news lately, and I wanted to share what the changes to our standards-based grading system means for your students. I'm not going to address whether standards-based education is the way to go. I'm not going to address the validity of the Common Core state standards. That is for another day. So grades used to be calculated by averaging all of a student's scores. Power law is a way of calculating grades where the most recent scores are worth more than earlier scores. So in addition to scads of data that supports just how much more fabulous this is than plain old averaging, links are available below, that really kind of makes sense on a gut level, doesn't it? For my students, their division skills in May are probably more relevant to you at the end of the year than how they were performing in September. Although how they performed in September is still an important data point. And as ever, if a calculation doesn't seem to reflect a student's consistent classroom performance, I can always include comments explaining the data. And hopefully I'm going to be talking with families more than just at progress report and report card time anyway. Another piece that's come up in the news is the Gradebook conditional matrix. So this is where secondary folks are kind of freaking out, and rightfully so in some respects. There used to be a crazy complex sliding scale that explained how you calculate a final course grade. Now the chart is really simple, but I have seen it give bad data for students who have a rough patch in the middle of the year. The good news for elementary families is that as of this year, we don't have final course grades, so we don't have to deal with the conditional matrix at all. Now, if you do want to weigh in on this issue, the school board's work study session is happening this Tuesday, December 3rd at 5 p.m. at Federal Way High School. Speaking of the school board, I do need to mention equity. So I believe that standards-based education, standards-based grading, Common Core state standards, and power law all help give feedback to families and students in a more accurate and equitable way than we've seen in the past. Now, this especially impacts students who struggled in a traditional grading system despite demonstrating proficiency and depth of understanding. I'm talking about oftentimes our minority and our students in poverty. Standards-based grading and power law should be benefiting those traditionally low-achieving populations. But at last week's school board meeting, Superintendent New noted that across other demographic lines, such as race or socioeconomic status, the changeover from the power law to averaging was essentially static. And one of the reasons that I think that we're not seeing this system working as well as we anticipated is that if we enter garbage data into the grading system, we're going to get garbage out, regardless of what the system is. And even beyond that then, if our instruction is garbage, we will probably get garbage results. So the largest issue here, despite what you're seeing in the media, is really not about grading. The largest issue is really instruction and communication, which is the root cause of what we're then seeing in our grades. How are we designing high quality instruction and assessment that can demonstrate our students are proficient and then gives feedback to both students and families about how they can be proficient? Now, there are some steps in this direction. For example, I'm currently serving on the Math Assessment Committee, and I spent last year on the ELA Module Committee. But that's really not the focus of what I'm seeing and hearing and reading, so I wanted to share kind of that backstory with you. So are there ways to game the grading system? Yes. Are there flaws in our implementation of it? Yes. Are there huge gaping communication holes between administration, building leadership, teachers, and families? Absolutely. And so acknowledging that, there are things that teachers and families can be doing. We can advocate for instruction that uses rubrics, anchor papers, classroom-based assessments that authentically give students a chance to demonstrate their proficiency. So in our class, what seems to be working is I send home feedback on student work every single week. Students keep their larger projects in a portfolio at school that's accessible to families at any time. Performance tasks that are entered into Gradebook are usually accompanied by personal comments from me. Students receive rubrics for all performance tasks ahead of time, and we talk extensively about expectations before beginning any projects, so they know what's expected of them to be considered proficient or to be meeting standard. There are no surprises. I appreciate that the school board did release survey data from families, students, and teachers about how the grading system is working for them. Only 19% of students reported that they felt their grades communicated their progress towards meeting standard. There's a couple issues with that. First of all, that's a sample size of about 900 students from a district that serves 20,000 students. And second of all, grades aren't the only way that we communicate student progress. If I had similar numbers in my classroom, that would mean that only 5 of my students find our system of feedback and grading to be useful, and that's absolutely unacceptable. But the grades themselves are not the only piece. It's about communication between students, families, and teachers at all levels of the process, not just the final grade. Please let me know what I can do to help improve our system of providing you and your family with relevant feedback on your students' performance in class.